Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 237 for the 4th of May 2013. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Now, before we get into what's coming up on this week's show, in the past week it came to my attention that something I said on a skeptical activism panel in Manchester at the QED-Con may have been taken the wrong way. Maybe. In fact, I think it was in certain quarters. Anyway, I issued this statement a couple of days ago on Facebook, and, I'll repeat it here. During a panel at the recent QED-Con in Manchester, I made comments that seemed to have caused some concern. When trying to emphasise the importance of being careful and doing your homework when being an active skeptic, it is possible I was clumsy with my words. Having just come off the main stage, maybe my thoughts weren't as sharp as they should have been. If anyone got the impression that I was discouraging grassroots skeptical activism or that this work should be left to those with more expertise, then I do apologise. Indeed, Michael Marshall picked me up on my comment to clarify what I had just said, and I immediately agreed with him. To be clear, we need grassroots activism, and I encourage it. Many of the promos on the Skeptic Zone are indeed for grassroots skeptics. My main message, albeit not as clear as it should have been, was to take care. Well, there you go. I hope that clears up any confusion or people weren't exactly sure what I was getting at the time. I hope that makes that clear. But coming up on this week's show, it's back to Manchester, back to QED-Con, when I chat to Dr Colin Wright. Dr Colin Wright is involved with something called Maths Jam. He's a mathematician, he's a juggler, and he does lots of... He's a sort of a guy, he sort of reminds me of the Doctor, in Doctor Who. So he carries this little case around with him and he opens it up and out pops all sorts of surprises and tricks and puzzles and problems and illusions. It's quite something. Anyway, I'm going to have a chat with Dr Colin Wright coming up at the top of the show. And after that, it's a week in science with our good friend Dr Paul Willis from the Royal Institution of Australia at riaus.org.au. It seems like every week is another big week in science. Well, that's true. Following that, Dr Rachie reports. A very different Dr Rachie. Dr Rachie was on ABC Radio in Melbourne in the past week on 774 with Richard Stubbs. So Dr Rachie reports this week is her appearance on Melbourne Radio talking about vaccination issues, and she even takes call-in talkback. That's very interesting. Good on you, Dr Rachie. Good on you for getting out there on the mainstream media. And we very much thank 774 ABC Radio for this audio. And to round off the show, Maynard's spooky action. You can't keep him away. You can't keep a good man down. Maynard heads back to Sydney Skeptics in the pub and asks the big question. The big question this week. Should skeptics still investigate UFOs? Find out what Sydney Skeptic and the pub people think later in the show. Now, thank you to all the people who have been writing in saying how much they enjoyed our little space adventure, Solar Flare.
All stop, Captain.
Right. Chief Chan, I need DERP 5 now. Can we do it?
Captain, that emergency stop burnt out the antimatter exchange, the relay couplings, the microwave soup reheater, and my hair dryer.
Chief, we need DERP 5. Hairdryer or not.
Hi, Captain. Chan out.
If you haven't heard it, please visit www.skepticzone.tv. Scroll down a little bit and you can see the link for Solar Flare. A lot of work went into that and we had an enormous amount of fun putting that all together. It did take a long time, longer than I would have thought, but when you listen to it, I think you'll understand why. The production that went into it was quite something. But yeah, lots of good comments coming back, lots of emails I've been getting here, people telling me they've laughed certain parts of their anatomy off listening to it. That's all very encouraging. And if you liked Solar Flare, if you thought it was great fun, please spread the word. Please blog it, tweet it, write to your friends and your enemies and tell them to give Solar Flare a listen. Maybe they'll enjoy it. Now, our friends down in Canberra, the ACT, the Australian Capital Territory, our nation's capital, have been very busy, as always, and they've been very kind. They've invited me to come and give a talk. So I'll be appearing in Canberra on June the 1st, from 1:30 to 3 o'clock, at the Lecture Theatre, CSIRO Discovery Centre, which is in Cluny's Ross Street, Acton in the ACT. And I'll be giving my talk, Adventures of a Paranormal Investigator, or Don't Come the Raw Prawn with Me. Ghosts, spoon-bending, mind tricks, talking with the dead, water divining, and anti-vaccination movement all come under the microscope in this talk and demonstration. So that's the 1st of June. For more information, visit www.canberraskeptics.org.au. This is the talk I've been doing around the world lately, including places like Oslo and Ireland. Well, this is entirely appropriate because after the talk, we'll be heading for King O'Malley's Irish pub. I hope to see you there. Well, that's enough from me for this introduction. It's time for me to run downstairs and have some, let me see, can you guess? I bet you can't. Spaghetti on toast. While I do that, I hope you enjoy The Skeptic Zone. Dr. Colin Wright, what is this math jam?
Maths jam.
Maths jam?
Yeah.
Bit of a tongue twister. Tell us all about it.
The basic idea of Maths Jam is that a guy called Matt Parker had some friends. He actually has friends. And they were gathered together in a pub one evening in London. And somebody showed a new gimmick that they had, a new toy that they had. And they were all science-based people. So they started to play with that. And then somebody else had a puzzle that they showed. And so they started talking about puzzles and games and maths and those sorts of toys. And they said, yeah, we should do this more often. We don't get a chance to just kind of geek out together and swap these sorts of games and puzzles and so on. So I said, well, let's meet up again. And so it started at the second last Tuesday of every month. They get a group of people and they would just go to a pub and commandeer a table and start to do maths with each other. And puzzles and games and toys, not specifically calculations. In fact, pretty much specifically not calculations. And it was in a pub. So it was adults sharing amongst themselves as is equals almost. Although, of course, some of them were more mathematically able and some were less mathematically able, but that didn't matter because they were sharing fun games, toys, puzzles, and so on. And then I went to a big conference in America and came back to another conference here, and one of my friends said, there's no place for adults to chat about maths. There are so many, there are serious conferences about education and maths education, but there's nowhere just to get together and play. And so I went and talked to Matt and James Grime, who goes out, he's another maths guy who goes out and talks to school kids and adults and so forth. And we got together and we said, well, how can we do this? And so we got together to run a weekend of exactly this kind of thing. It's not attached to education. It's not attached to continuing professional development. It's not worthy. It's just let's get together and have fun. As a side effect, there's a bunch of stuff that people take back to their schools to get kids interested, puzzles, toys, games, and so forth. But we have a wide range of people. We have an Egyptologist who comes and talks about the maths in ancient Egypt. We have a linguist who comes and talks about patterns in language, a musicologist who comes. We have retired maths lecturers. We do have students come along, because this is not in a pub, so we can have some younger kids come along. But it's for adults to play with the mathematical ideas. It's not to be attached to education or to train people. And all the talks are 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
5 minutes. Which means
it makes them, the person giving the talk, really think about what they're going to say, right?
Oh, yeah. And the other thing is, you can't try and teach people things in 5 minutes. All you can do is show them something that you think is interesting, and you think that they will find interesting. So you are sharing something that you find interesting. And we've got sort of 100 to 150 people come along to these weekends, and amongst them there will be some who just don't care about what you just showed them, but there will be others who think that is really cool and then come and talk to you. And that's the other big thing, is only 60% of the time is actually spent in sessions, in talks. So we have an hour of talks. We fit 8 or 9 talks in an hour, and then we have 30 minutes as a break for people to play with toys that are on the tables or to talk to the speakers from the previous session. And then we go back for another 8 or 9 talks in an hour, and then we have another half an hour break. So there's plenty of time for people to play with the toys that are there, play games against each other, try and construct the models that they've got, or talk to the speakers about what they're interested in.
Now, if our listeners care to find out more about this, where's the URL? What can they visit?
www.mathsjam.com.
It's pretty easy to remember. And do you have a conundrum for our listeners, maybe?
A really cool one. If you take a square,
yes,
it's really easy to cut it into pieces, identical pieces, where all of them touch the centre.
Right, yes.
First question,
yeah.
In how many ways can you do this? That's a tough one. But the second question is, if you cut a circle into identical pieces, it's hard to think of any way of doing it where they don't all touch the centre. I mean, you just slice it up like a pizza.
Yeah.
So the challenge is, cut a circle into identical pieces that do not all touch the centre point.
We have a little audience listening to our interview today, and their faces are going, ooh, ooh. That's a good one. There you are, listeners. There's a little conundrum for you. And visit the website, and maths is fun.
Maths is fun.
Skeptic Zone listeners. Do you know what to do in August? Come to Stockholm, Sweden and meet astronaut Christer Fuglesang, activist Hailey Stevens, stats guru Hans Rosling, undercover health journalist Anna Bessén, and many more at the 15th European Skeptics Congress. Friday the 23rd to Sunday the 25th of August in Stockholm, Sweden.
The 15th European Skeptics Congress. www.euroskepticscon.org. www.euroskepticscon.org.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus. This week, a new bird flu, the evolution of taller, thinner women, and tiny flying robots. Chinese scientists have confirmed that a new influenza virus has been transmitted from birds to humans. 108 people are thought to have been infected with the H7N9 virus since it first emerged in February this year, with a suspected death toll of 22. People appear to have picked up the virus from chickens in meat markets. In a separate study, scientists have identified a possible way that the H5N1 form of bird flu, which first emerged in 2003, infects humans. Australian researchers may have found a cheap and easy way to detect early cases of Alzheimer's disease. Symptoms of Alzheimer's only show up after significant damage has occurred to the brain, and currently early detection tests are invasive and expensive. The research found compounds in the blood that differed between people with high and low risks of developing the disease. This new blood signature could allow widespread screening and early interventions that may slow the progression of Alzheimer's. Girls who received 2 doses of the HPV vaccine had the same protection as those who had the recommended 3 doses. In an effort to protect bees, the European Union has announced severe restrictions on the use of 3 pesticides. Cicadas clean themselves by making dewdrops jump from their wings. And living longer and having fewer children may be making women taller and thinner. Scientists at Harvard University have built a flying robot that is no bigger than a housefly. They used cutting-edge materials to build microstructures within the wing, allowing it to flap when electrified. The tiny robot offers a new way to study the flight mechanics of flapping wings, as well as helping miniaturized sensing and computational technologies. If you love a week in science, and why wouldn't you, why not share it with your friends? We're growing a healthy following and you can help spread the word. Send your friends to riaus.org.au/weekinsci for video and podcast versions, plus more information on the stories. That's been the highlights of another big week in science. For more information and other science news, check out the RiAus website, riaus.org.au, where you can also sign up for notifications of future episodes. You can also follow A Week in Science on Twitter using the hashtag WeekInSci. I'm Paul Willis, and on behalf of the RiAus team, I'll see you next week.
This is Desiree, host of Canadian radio show Skeptically Speaking. For those of you that don't know, Canada's quite similar to Australia. People know us primarily for our weather and our beer, and we have a queen, just like you do. Same one as you do, actually. We also have mythical monsters, and people who think they have psychic abilities, and people who think that vaccinations are bad for you. So keep listening to the Skeptic Zone, and know that we're all in this together.
Now it's time for Dr Rachie Reports with Dr Rachael Dunlop.
We're going to look at immunisation next. And although the evidence against immunisation has been completely debunked, still people cling to the idea that immunisation is somehow bad or dangerous or you shouldn't, be careful, look out. Are there risks involved in immunisation? Sure. What likelihood of risk are they? What level of risk are they, and what are genuine risks as opposed to rumours and the hangovers of discounted evidence? Well, we're going to talk about that next. It's very difficult to shake an opinion once you've formed it, particularly if you've been vocal in that opinion. If you've stood there and argued a case and then find out that the case you argued had no basis in fact, it's often difficult to retract and quietly go, it's completely out of line with that. I guess that's part of why an anti-immunisation debate still exists, that there's some undercurrent of uncertainty, there's some, but didn't I hear something? Interestingly, the rates of immunisation in Australia have fallen in some areas. Some areas of Australia, there are people going, no, I choose not to immunise my children. I wonder why. Rachael Dunlop is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Technology in Sydney. She recently wrote an article on The Conversation about this. Hi, Rachael.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me.
You're also Vice President of Australian Skeptics.
Yes, I am.
What prompted you to write the article in the first place?
Well, I've been studying the anti-vaccination movement in Australia for about 3 or 4 years now, and the more you read the stuff that they write, the more you see the same sort of things come up again and again and again. And I guess some of them are what you call unsinkable rubber ducks in a sense. It doesn't matter how many times you refute them or you explain them to people, they still seem to stick around. And these things are quite tenacious, and they can influence parents' decisions to vaccinate, particularly through their friends or, their network of people around childcare and that sort of thing. So it's important, I think, to address them so that parents have a cheat sheet in a way which they can refer to and get some, confidence that these things are actually myths, they're not true, then there's no evidence in in what these people are saying.
Part of what grinds my gears about this argument is that people are willing to make decisions about their kids not getting immunised based on a conversation, some friends said, but if they won't research the facts, and B, if they do that, they look with suspicion on Western medicine, I'm doing that thing with my fingers, and scientific findings.
Yeah.
So that rumour and innuendo from a unscientific, no-knowledge-based person is somehow given more weight than, this is what several years of research and science shows us. Why is that?
It's curious, isn't it? And I think it's partly because anecdotes are very powerful things. There's some psychology behind that. I'm not a psychologist, so I couldn't begin to explain it. But the power of anecdote is very strong. The thing about science is it can be pretty boring, it can be pretty dry, and people don't generally relate to it. So I can, sit here and put up graphs until the cows come home showing you the evidence that once we introduced the HIV vaccine in 1994, cases dropped 90%. But that's not particularly emotive. And when you have stories of children that have been injured by vaccines or their parents say that they have, that stuff is incredibly emotive. And there are some...
Yeah, sorry.
Richard.
You're in Sydney. We're going to bump into each other a little bit, so we won't worry about that. There's also that other thing too, that people go, pharmaceutical companies make money out of vaccines, so... They're always going to say you should have them, and everyone nods and goes, that must be the reason.
I mean, of course they make money, that they're a business, but in fact most of their profit does not come from making vaccinations. And when you think about it logically, wouldn't it be more beneficial for pharmaceutical companies if we all got these diseases? Because then we'd be sicker for longer. We'd probably have chronic side effects, chronic long-term effects. Surely that would make them more money than preventative medicine, which is essentially what vaccines are.
You've studied this for so long. What's the thinking behind people who don't have their child vaccinated in Australia, particularly in terms of what happens if that child then goes overseas?
Yeah, this is a really tricky situation because I guess there's two camps in Australia. There's what we know as the conscientious objectors, and these are parents that have identified as objecting to vaccination, and they've actually signed a form to say they will not get their children vaccinated. And then there's probably a large percentage, and that group is only about 1.7% of the population. But there's a group that we can't really quantitate or measure, and that's called the fence sitters. And they're parents that are just confused and worried about the rumours that they hear, and so they might either delay their kids' vaccination or they might not get the full schedule of vaccination because of things that they've heard. But as you say, this does impact on children down the track, and only 2 years ago in Brisbane, a 22-year-old girl died of diphtheria after a friend of hers brought it back from overseas, and she probably didn't even realise she wasn't vaccinated for diphtheria, and unfortunately she caught it and she died. So in Australia now, most of the diseases that we see here are imported because we have a fairly high level of vaccination in general and on average. So mostly when you see those sort of things happen, it's because they're brought in from overseas or people pick them up overseas.
John's called in from Kew. Hi, John.
Yes, look, I wanted just to make a few points. The problem with vaccinations is that they're not based on the gold standard of scientific proof, which is the controlled trial that compares a vaccinated to an unvaccinated population. And if that is done, we know for sure whether vaccines do help to reduce the incidence of the infectious disease they're intended for, and also that the vaccinated group does not suffer adverse effects which would outweigh the benefits. Now, that is not being done, and that's the problem. Now, if you look at the whooping cough vaccination with the acellular vaccine, this was found that the epidemic that was in Australia, the vaccination offered no benefit in terms of reducing the incidence. The vaccination rates were about 90%. Of the cases, 89% were vaccinated and 11 were unvaccinated, which means that the vaccination made no difference at all. There is no data about the intensity of the infection, so we can't report on that. But that was based on analysis of the statistics after the event.
John, do you think people should vaccinate their children?
I don't know, because we don't have proof about safety or effectiveness.
No, it's just an opinion. What's your opinion?
I don't know, because we do not have the proper data about safety and effectiveness.
Let me put it another way. Is there a benefit to the society if everyone's vaccinated?
There may be, there may not be. We don't know.
So you doubt it?
Can I comment on that, Richard?
Sure. I wanted to let John get all his points out and make his case. What do you think? He said that that we can't compare this, that we just don't know. We've never compared a vaccinated population with a non-vaccinated population, so we have no idea if it's effective.
Well, we have actually, but the point that you raised initially about the randomised controlled trial, well, we can't do that ethically because a randomised controlled trial would involve taking two groups, let's say, of children, putting them into two separate rooms, vaccinating one group, not vaccinating the other group, and exposing them to a vaccine-preventable disease. Now, how does everyone think about doing that? So doesn't sound like a very good idea,
sure,
does it?
But that means John's right, isn't he? That we haven't got a gold standard. We haven't got that classic scientific blind study. So therefore, how can we be certain about?
Because we have epidemiology. We have a lot of evidence from history that shows us that vaccination reduces vaccine-preventable diseases. Now, for example, when we stop vaccinating in particular areas, we see a resurgence of vaccine-preventable diseases.
What happened in Wales?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I mean, it's a good point you raised, John, because at the moment, because of low levels of vaccination for measles in Wales, there's been an outbreak of measles. There's now up to about 1,000 cases and one death. The man who died did have measles, and we're waiting for confirmation as to whether that was the cause. But we had levels drop there because people were afraid of the MMR vaccine, and so as soon as levels dropped, we got an increase in vaccine-preventable diseases. Now, the other thing is, where's smallpox now? Well, we got rid of smallpox because we vaccinated until it was gone. Polio's almost gone. We had 2 years free of polio in India just recently. So we don't need to do what John says is the gold standard. It's unethical to do it, and we don't need it because we've got plenty of evidence for it.
John doesn't agree, or can't form an opinion about immunisation or not because he says there's not enough evidence as to whether it works or not. Would you disagree?
I would disagree. I would suggest that he might be looking in the wrong places. And he did seem to quote some stats there, which I think he's cherry-picking slightly because he's talking about the age group that are young children with the whooping cough vaccine, which is covered under the DTAP. Now, if you look at the number of adults in Australia who are immune and still vaccinated against whooping cough, there's only about 11%. So in kids, yes, it's up to about 90, but in adults, it's down to around 11%. So it's likely that it's the adults who haven't had their boosters that are responsible for the resurgence of whooping cough.
But of course, there's lots of side effects of vaccines. We know, for example, that vaccines cause autism.
Oh, Richard. You've opened a Pandora's box there. We know that vaccines don't cause autism, actually.
But isn't it pernicious the way that stays? Despite evidence, and you look at Scandinavian evidence, and you look at the evidence that it came from originally, and how Lancet has come out and said this was biased, this has been completely discredited, and yet it sticks, doesn't it? I guess because people with kids with autism are desperate to find out why, and there's a smoking gun, so someone somehow believes it's immunisation.
Well, I think there's two reasons. One of them is that we don't know yet exactly what causes autism. There's no cure for autism. Also, the time of onset or diagnosis of autism coincides with the time that kids are receiving quite a few vaccinations. So it looks, if the child gets a vaccination and then they're diagnosed with autism, people make that connection. Well, it must be the vaccine because they were fine before they got that. And of course, that is a connection that people will make, but it's not the case.
What do we say? Correlation isn't causation?
Is not equals causation, yeah. I mean, it's like saying I go to bed every night and the sun comes up in the morning, therefore I caused the sun to come up. Well, no, that's going to happen anyway.
There's a correlation, but you didn't cause it.
Yeah, you didn't.
Rachael Dunlop is who you're chatting to, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Technology in Sydney, where she is. She's written columns for the conversation that we're having a conversation about. She's also vice president of the Australian Skeptics Incorporated, as opposed to association. And her field of study has been immunisation and immunology. And it's with that in mind that we're chatting about the rates of immunisation in Australia. Why is this anyone's concern? My kid is my kid, my choice is my choice. Shouldn't be of concern to you and your vaccinated choice.
Yeah, I think a vaccination is more than a personal choice, really. It's a community responsibility. And the reason for that is that people that can't get vaccinated do exist in our community. There are children who maybe are too young to have received all their vaccinations, and so until they've got their entire course of childhood schedule, they are still vulnerable and they're still likely to catch vaccine-preventable diseases.
Faye, I can example that. Faye's in Ballarat. Faye, you know all about someone catching a disease when you're too young to be vaccinated, don't you?
Yes, my grandson was less than 2 months old when he came in contact with a child who had not been vaccinated and obviously was carrying the germ, whatever, and he nearly died. He was in and out of hospital for a year.
This was with whooping cough?
Pardon?
This was whooping cough, your grandson.
Cough, yeah. It is the most horrific thing to watch because they literally stop breathing and they turn blue. And this tiny little baby, it was just appalling. So even if there was, a chance, I couldn't countenance people not having it.
It's hugely
important. We've had our boosters for subsequent children, but, you look at a 2-month-old child, and I remember hearing on Red's program one time, he was talking to a doctor whose own child was in that same situation, and it was exactly the same time, which is interesting.
But these are people who've made a choice without seeing the wider picture of its impact on the society they live in. Rachael, it's probably outside our scope to start to have a philosophical discussion about are we thinking of ourselves too much as a society and less about the needs of society in general, and does it lead us on to this kind of thinking? But that let's talk for a moment, though, about herd immunity. What is that?
Yeah, well, I prefer to call it community immunity, Richard, because it sounds a bit more warm and fuzzy. And basically it means that we need a level of vaccination in the community to prevent the outbreak of disease. And that varies for different vaccines, it varies for different diseases. But if we have roughly 95% of the population immunised against a certain disease, then there's no opportunity for it to have outbreaks and to spread through the community. So we call this community immunity, and that allows us to protect those like what Faye was referring to, her grandson who got pertussis, people that can't be vaccinated who may have cancer or receiving chemotherapy, elderly people who are particularly susceptible to vaccine-preventable diseases. And this stops these outbreaks from starting. And when this herd immunity or community immunity breaks down, that's when we see these vaccine-preventable diseases.
And of course, before it breaks down, there's a certain number who can slipstream the herd by not having it done, but figuring that, everyone else is, so there's no need for me to risk my child.
Yeah, they're relying on the herd, if you like, to protect themselves. And so this is when people will say, well, my child has never been vaccinated and he or she is still very healthy. Well, in most cases, you're relying on the fact that everyone else around you is vaccinated.
Yeah, that's right. Don't go to parts of Africa and find out the same. Graham's in Tooradin. Hey, Graham.
Hello.
Graham, what did you want to say about the Italian courts?
The Italian court found that the MMR vaccine causes autism.
What year was that?
That year is 2012.
So, in your mind, what does that mean?
That means that when they have the vaccine and they go home and they're cooked the next day and they say, well, it's just a case of it's coincidental, that it is not.
Are you taking that decision, if you've got the decision right, against any other evidence? Would that mean that, for example, you wouldn't have your kids vaccinated because of that Italian case?
I'm very careful about any vaccines that I would give them.
So what does that mean, being very careful? What would you do?
Just if I can digress.
Sure.
Attorneys for the Bush administration asked a federal court on Monday to order the documents on hundreds of cases of autism allegedly caused by childhood vaccines to be kept from the public.
Right. Which comes back to, how would you judge, back to the question, how would you judge which vaccines? You said you'd be very careful. How does that work? What would you do?
Well, they can just keep inventing vaccines.
Right. So, but I'm getting down to, how would you make the choice about which vaccines you'd give your children and which you wouldn't?
I would do my homework. Richard.
And your homework would be better than medical authorities because?
Because it would be my homework. Richard, if I can also tell you that the Japanese had a very high death rate in children, and they withdrew all vaccines until they were 2 years of age. And they now have one, I think, the lowest death rate among infants in the world.
Okay, well, these are a lot of interesting stats, and they're reworkings of a whole lot of others. I guess what causes my concern is the assumption that you'll research better than any medical facility. But let's see what Rachael has to say. Rachael, Graham's had a chat about what he feels, and he's obviously...
Yeah, well, let's touch on the Italian court first of all. I think the difference between evidence you have in a court and evidence that you get scientifically is very, very different. So in terms of, for example, there's a vaccine court in the US where people can go if they believe their child has been injured by a vaccine. And the evidence required for people to get compensation is 50% and a feather, which means just a little bit more than 50%. That's designed to compensate parents, but it's not scientifically decided. So you might also recall recently that the Italian court threw seismologists into jail because they didn't predict an earthquake. So you can look at the scientific evidence to show that MMR doesn't cause autism, which is overwhelming, and we now have many, many studies showing that. Or you can look at the decision of a court, which is not a scientific decision.
The Japanese
and I know which
study?
side I'm going to go with.
The Japanese study, they removed everything and the fatalities went down?
Well, they certainly removed MMR in mid-1993. They stopped using the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine for a period of time because they had a lot of side effects with that particular MMR vaccine, which wasn't being used in the rest of the world, by the way. And interestingly, if you thought that the MMR was causing autism, once the Japanese removed it, you would think that autism would drop dramatically. Well, guess what happened, Richard? autism cases continued to rise.
Yeah, you'll notice the evidence he was giving then said, fatalities increased. He didn't mention that autism because, as we know, the autism increased. It's interesting, isn't it? And what I find fascinating is people still argue and go, no, I'd be very careful. I'd do my own research on the internet, which is so much better than, say, I don't know, medical science doing their own who've trained to do it. I find that breathtaking that people can look you in the eye and go, yeah, I'd look it up myself and I'd do it better. It's fascinating. Rachael, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. Rachael Dunlop has been who you've been chatting to, a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Technology in Sydney, where she has for many years studied ethnomedicine and the whole vaccination debate, I guess, as opposed to perhaps had a look around on the internet. Rachael, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Finn. And I'm Rebecca. And we're the Skepticons. Skepticons is an Irish podcast by the Dublin Skeptic Society. It takes a conversational, irreverent look at science, news and skeptical topics from an Irish perspective. You can find us at www.theskepticons.com.
You're always sparing with your strong finance.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, I'm here at Skeptics in the pub. A lot of people at the bar because Dr Rachie's not here. There's a bit of extra room. And there's a few new people that haven't been along before. Sir, what's your name?
My name's Luke Egan.
You're here for the first time. Why is that, Luke?
My friend invited me on Facebook, so there's an example of new forms of media getting people involved, I guess.
And how did they know to invite you? Is it just a blanket invitation, or have you been sceptical about something in the past?
I've always been a skeptic for my whole adult life, and I used to be a subscriber to the Australian Skeptic magazine. I should probably resubscribe.
Or maybe the online version. Yeah, maybe should.
Yeah, maybe the online version would be good. I think he just knew that I would probably find it worthwhile, and I have found it very good.
Now, we've got the question of the week coming up for you, but first of all, what's your specialty area? What's the bit of scepticism that gets your goat? What's the one you're interested in?
Oh, well, I come from a psychology background, so I'm pretty skeptical of various parapsychological claims, and things in the area of the mind and the brain and all the kinds of misguided ideas that go on in that area.
Well, one of them I'm just pulling out of my genes is perhaps the alien abduction theory and people who have wake sleeping and they imagine that they've been abducted by aliens when they're paralysed. Would that be part of a psychological situation, or is that not?
Definitely it is. Also, a lot of in the medical field, I work at a medical institute, and a lot of sleep physicians.
You don't work at the Pons Institute, do you? Because I've seen the Pons Institute on television, all those women wearing the white lab coats doing the makeup stuff. You're not a Pons Institute, are you?
No, not the Pons, no.
Okay, just a check.
Yeah. But if you ask a sleep physician, they can tell you all about the kinds of... forgive me if I'm murdering the term, but it's like hypnagogic or hypnagogic hallucinations or something.
I'm sure that's pretty close to it.
Something like that, yeah.
And what's the psychological area that's closest to your heart that intersects with the skepticism?
I suppose it would be trying to unravel the confusion around what role neuroscience can play in our understanding of behaviour and psychological states.
So how do you feel when you see a TED talk about the consciousness of someone like Rupert Sheldrake getting up there and saying that there's a precognition of images and that his evidence shows that? How do you feel about that?
Oh, yeah, that reminds me of this debacle. In one of the most prestigious psych journals, the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, published that awful paper by... What's his name?
It wasn't Rupert Sheldrake.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't him.
Yes, but I think we know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
And what was it purporting to prove?
Precognition. Yeah.
Oh, right.
And the thing is, at no point in the paper did he posit a mechanism to explain the phenomenon. And to me, if you have a mechanismless idea, then I would prefer chance as an explanation.
Although, as may be said to you by a non-skeptic, when Copernicus and Galileo were originally making their observations, there was planets moving in odd ways, and they hadn't originally figured out why they were doing it, so they hadn't worked out a mechanism originally either.
They hadn't, but they didn't posit a brand new theory. So they kind of sat there and said, here are the observations, whereas this paper put forward the observations and then said, therefore, precognition. And that is pushing it way too far. If you had a mechanism to go with that hypothesis, then, okay, it might still be lunacy, but at least you've got a mechanism that we can talk about. Without a mechanism, I prefer chance as the best explanation.
And you've fronted up for the first time here at Skeptics at the Pub at the Coronation Hotel. And by the way, the next one, everybody, is on Thursday, the 6th of June at the Coronation Hotel upstairs in Sydney. Come along, we'll see you then. Would you recommend the time?
Definitely, yeah.
It was pretty wild. Oh, it gets wilder from here. You haven't been long. Wait till the strippers arrive. They're skeptical strippers, so they don't actually take off their clothes. They just tell you that they might. They're actually quantum strippers.
Quantum strippers?
Yeah.
So if I put them in a box and didn't observe them, would they be naked?
They'd be naked, but you wouldn't see it.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Thanks, Luke. And have you got a website or a blog or anything everyone can go to? Everyone we can debate you?
I do. It's not skeptically oriented, but it's called...
I've got photos of cats.
It's a bit more... a little bit more highbrow than that. I have a blog called Sydney Sidewinder at .wordpress.com. I talk about how great Sydney is and things to do around here. So when you're not at a skeptical meeting, there are other things you can get up to as well.
And of course, the question of the night is should skeptics still be worried about the issue of UFOs? I think that the reveal is just around the corner. I'm sure they're going to be coming up and saying, yes, it was all real all the time, it's been misinformation. That's how I feel. How do you feel? Should skeptics be still bothered with UFOs?
I think if we have time, that's fine, but with things like the anti-vax campaign, which is like those guys have blood on their hands as far as I'm concerned. So if we can prevent people from dying needlessly and then still have time left over to debate UFOs, that's fine. But if not, let's prioritize the real life or death stuff.
I couldn't agree more with you, and that's why I'm usually very silent on that issue, because they need people to know what they're talking about, like Dr Rachie. People like me coming out doing a can only damage the cause, I feel.
That's fair enough, yeah.
So I'll go home and I'll give Dr Rachie all the support while she's doing the blogging, but I'll be watching Ancient Aliens.
Sounds good to me too.
We've got 70-plus people here upstairs at the Coronation Hotel. And, of course, as I said, the next one is on the 6th of June. Come along and you can meet people like Jessica Singer. Hello.
Hello, indeedy. How are you?
Pretty good. Her name might be Singer, but she's never been on The Voice or Australia's Got Talent, although apparently you do in certain areas.
Oh, well, I'll just let my reputation precede me in that regard.
Tap dancing. Now, Richard has set the question for the night. Should the skeptics still be worried about UFOs? Now, I was just talking to a first-time skeptic here, and he thought that we've got bigger concerns like vaccinations. But do you feel it's something the skeptics should be concerned with at all?
Oh, well, that's a hard one. We have a skeptic. One of our people down in Melbourne, Steve Roberts, has done a lot of work on the UFO phenomena, or the belief in alien abductions, and he did a very interesting talk about how the reports of so-called abductions spike every time there's an alien movie or a UFO movie, and I think it's interesting from that point of view. I think it's a phenomenon that we need to keep tabs on. It's also something that people do get very distressed about. So if we can help them and reassure them, that's good. I remember our former executive officer, Barry Williams, he would always get phone calls from very distressed people, often in the middle of the night when Channel 7 had shown some bloody documentary or other. And they just wanted reassurance. And if we can help and perhaps, just give a rational, calm explanation, I think there's still a role for that.
Okay, if anyone would like to go back, if they can, I'll recap for them. I spoke to Steve Novella about this issue at TAM Australia when he was out, and I said, there's a chance UFOs are real, and he said, well, it's so statistically small that they might be real, but it's probably not worth bothering to look. And I chatted with an Australian researcher who'd gone around the world following this at various spots around the world that were hotspot. So, to me, there is something going on that's worth studying, even if it's just psychological or it's cultural.
Yes, definitely from a psychological, cultural point of view. But in terms of, do they come and visit us? I don't think so. Yeah. Going to these UFO conventions and watching very grainy and bad photographs of nothing in particular. That's a bit of a waste of time. But yeah.
Look, I'm a big fan of Out of the Blue, the Fox films that have been made, and I Know What I Saw. Now, I Know What I Saw could be actually retitled Argument from Authority, because it's... And by the way, we just had a lecture here by Tim Mendham who said don't use... don't bring up logical fallacies when you're having a conversation with the media or with people, because people go, oh, pointy-headed, don't they, straight away? Don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And basically, it's lawyers, it's pilots, it's politicians, it's various people, it's policemen, Air Force people that you would think would know what they see in the sky, that have seen unusual things, and that's what I Know What I Saw was based around. Now, do you think there's any argument there?
Well, I'm a lawyer, and anybody.
And you also play one on TV.
Well, I wouldn't mind collecting a salary for doing so, but that would be good.
She sat just behind Ally McBeal. If you freeze the frame, you can see her going into the unisex toilet.
Yep, absolutely. So so as a lawyer, the belief is that first-hand evidence is best evidence, and first-hand testimony and what you see is the best evidence. But I think as skeptics, we all know how our brain can fool us, how our perceptions can fool us, and how that can be very misleading.
Well, as a lawyer, do you think that perhaps William Shatner's performance as Danny Crane is the greatest portrayal of a lawyer on screen or on television ever in the history of the world?
I'm sorry to admit I've never seen it.
Well,
I know, isn't that egregious?
We've got a lawyer who's never watched Boston. Well, that's it then. Look, I'm going to go talk to someone else.
I don't watch legal programs. I'm sorry. The only one I watch is Rumpole. I love Rumpole. Stop sniggering.
No. Look. It's just as interesting as the Duchess of Duke Street.
Oh, I remember that.
Well, look, I better ask some more people. Thank you for your time.
No worries. Take care, Maynard.
Richard Saunders is back from overseas. He's been banned from Czechoslovakia, Norway. There was that incident in Trondheim that the police are still looking for him for. He was seen sitting in a park talking to a microphone for a while there. And we're actually in our special studio, which is the corridor. See you later, people. Thanks for coming. Bye. We had some lovely people there. And Richard Saunders, how are you?
Jet-lagged, Maynard.
Yeah, look, and now you had a great time. You've been around the world being sceptical. And I've been asking people about UFOs. What's your feeling about whether UFOs should still be tackled by the sceptical movement or not?
Oh, I think they should, because it's a good way for young skeptics to cut their teeth. You know, look at the investigations and how to talk to people, what witness accounts mean, and all the rest of it. But it's something that's been studied for so many years now, and it's still the results are pretty crummy, as Carl Sagan would say. But it's still a worthwhile endeavour, especially when you're learning skepticism.
Now, I hark back to the Dirty Disbelievers show that I did with you, Dr Rachie, and Jamie Leonardo. And as you know, Jamie Leonardo is very interested in investigating this area. And he brought up something which I hadn't thought about, in that most skeptics would automatically think that we're looking at an alien life form when it could be multidimensional or something like that, which I tend to go with there. Of course, there's no proof for that hypothesis, if you could call it that. Do you think that me thinking like that, I need to put my head in a bucket of water or not? And Richard's got that smile on his face that goes, yeah, we need to put Maynard's head in a bucket of water.
Yeah, well, no, that's a perfectly good line of thinking, Maynard. No, it really is. I mean, why would it have to be aliens? Why not think of it? Is it a multi-dimensional creature from Earth? Is it someone from the future? Is it...
I also think that it's a phenomenon worth investigating, because if it isn't, what if it's a psychological or a cultural thing? And as I've mentioned in my conversation with Steve Novella at the TAM Australia, he thought it's so small it's not worth investigating because of the percentage chance of it being real is so small. I think that if it is a cultural or psychological activity or an event, that's worth investigating.
Yes, it is, but not so much from what we might call a classical skeptical point of view. And I look at classical skepticism as dating back from the 70s, when it's all about psychics and monsters and UFOs and Bigfoot and all that sort of stuff. I lump those sort of things in together.
And obviously you'd be concerned that it might distract the movement from other ones that you consider to be more life-threatening, such as vaccination and anti-medical practices.
Well, I guess there is an argument for that, but, there are a lot of skeptics, especially a lot of young, keen skeptics who want to investigate these things, and I say good luck to them. Fine, go for it. I've got no problem with that.
And have you got a problem with me enjoying the entire Ancient Alien series?
Haven't you listened to Solar Flare?
Oh, look, and sidebar, people, Solar Flare has come out, and I've been flooded with... Well, actually, no emails, but Richard might have got a couple. Solar Flare, it's like Commander Saunders has done a fantastic job.
Captain Saunders, I was promoted. I did get a message about Solar Flare, and it said that you stole the show.
Oh, here's 3 new people going past. See you later. Bye. This is. I'm talking to Richard Saunders because he's an alcoholic. You can't chat to him later. You've got to get him early.
While he's still upright.
Yes. No, they said that you stole the show, so there you go.
Well, yeah, I did, and that's why it wasn't out for a while. He said, Maynard, give it back. Oh, look, it was a lot of fun to do, and a lot of work went into that, people, and there might be another one, but believe me, Richard did a lot of work on that. The production and Stefan and everybody was involved in it. I'm a bit of a fan of our SGU man. Well, hello, I enjoy him.
Jay Novella, he was fun.
Jay Novella, he had that Dr. Evil touch about him.
He did, he hammed it up a bit, which was great.
And it is a lot of work. There may be another one.
Maybe.
And look, before we finish, is there anything we can point to people? We're back here at the Coronation Hotel. I mentioned a few times on the Thursday, the 6th of June. It's upstairs at the Coronation Hotel in Sydney.
It's the 6th of June, is it?
No,
well, that's next
That's the next one. That's what I'm saying. It's the next one. See, I'm getting people early.
He's ahead of me, folks.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll see you there.
Okay.
Spoon bending lessons.
Okay. We're here with our aeronautics correspondent, usually. If you've seen any show that involves the phrase black box that's not an adult movie or a video clip, this guy's probably seen it.
I tend to read the accident reports more than the...
You mean, don't you like the dramatisations?
No, the mother with the child and the guy who helped invent the IBM computer and then the this and that. So, okay, I know enough of them to have seen that.
What is your name, sir, and what's your website so we can complain to you later?
My name is Robin Hilliard, and my website
Okay. Google his name. Goodness knows what will come up. But
yes, I appear on Google a lot.
Do you think skeptics should still concern themselves with the phenomena of UFOs, or is that, so 10 years ago? Personally, I think that it's the major thing on my mind because I haven't got the brain power to work with the vaccination issue. But what do you think about the rest of us?
I think... I always remember, I suppose my scepticism, I'm sort of echoing something that Swoopy said on Skepticality once, I think, but a lot of people get into scepticism from the wonder of the mystery. I remember all the Ewersborn kids' books when I was in the 70s, Ewersborn Book of UFOs, which I still have, and all these things. And I think, and at the same time, I started becoming sceptical about things, but that was what the excitement was.
Michael Shermer has said that the paranormal is a gateway drug to skepticism. Do you think that's true?
I can only speak for myself, but I think so, and because I've heard other people say that, people like Swoopy say similar things. I think, and it's also Benjamin Radford, I think, was saying that as well.
Benjamin Radford?
Well, he was talking about monster talk and stuff, and everyone loves that.
Fantastic, and they're taking a break for a couple of months.
Oh, they are?
Yeah. They're taking a break through till June or something like that. They've got a few things on. I was going to interview him and do a thing on the show. I think they're actually taking a break so they can avoid me interviewing them.
No, never.
Oh, there's something about Benjamin Radford and a PhD or something, but that's just all smoke screen.
Yeah, definitely. He's actually gone up to the mothership for a short time.
Yeah. So what do you think when qualified pilots, as in the movie that I Know What I Saw, which is also known as an argument from authority, what do you think of that sort of thing when qualified pilots see something in the sky that seems to be flying around quite close to them, like the incident that happened over the English Channel?
Well, I actually remember one of the first... I was so into this when I was young. There's a great book called Aliens Over the Antipodes, which went into detail about Frederick Valentich, and so I was very excited when the Skeptic actually covered that story a few years ago because I was fascinated about that when I was
He was circling a large object above him, and the last thing we heard from him was some sort of metallic clank, as if he'd ran into it or something.
Yes. Well, I think... it fascinated me, and I can remember sort of squinting at aeroplanes approaching Sydney Airport, trying to pretend that they were UFOs and making paper models of them. And this is the UFO that I saw, in inverted commas. So I can remember. I do think it's a gateway to skepticism, because around the same time I started reading, I remember the book that was done by Randy and Dick Smith on the water divining in Australia, and I remember that was in the school library, so I'm very thankful to the librarian at that school for having that in the library, because that was a sort of a very early start.
And you have a hell of an overdue fee on that too.
I did give that one back.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. And of course I'm over near the speaker. Let's just get down to some of the music you can hear in the background. Yeah, sure, it's great, but it's no Belinda Carlisle, people, is it really? Now, who have we got here?
Hi, Maynard. I'm Nick.
Hi, Nick. Pleased to see you again. Tell us, do you think skeptics should still be interested in the UFO phenomenon, or it's something that's had its day?
Well, UFOs, there's been the ancient alien astronaut proponents saying that
look, I love it when they cut to Eric von Daniken and he's there with the glass of scotch and the gold ring. It's fantastic. I'm a Daniken fan.
Well, you've got to have someone to criticise, some target to pick on with the crazy theories that every single pyramid is pointing up towards ancient UFOs.
And what is your favourite area of skepticism normally?
Probably medicine. I think that's one of the big areas where people, right now there's this issue with the measles outbreak, and it's been going on for years that there's been so much misinformation that we're starting to finally see the real cause of the ultimate result with real disease going around, and it's such a big issue right now.
And also, who have we got here?
Chris.
Hello, Chris. Are you a long-time skeptic, a medium-time skeptic, or were you the guy who started the organisation with Dick Smith?
I've been a skeptic for 60-odd years, but I've actually been associated with, if you like, the movement for a few years, coming to Skeptic in the pub. My entree was listening to Richard and Dr Rachie on Skeptic Zone, and very early on in the piece.
And what do you make of the show? There's been 300 episodes. Is there something that stuck out in your mind, or are you going, these guys should lift their game, they're not as good as they used to be?
No, to the lone skeptic, they're a light in the darkness. And
it's good to know that there's people like you, as we saw when we had TAM Australia or the conference down in Melbourne.
Exactly. It's nice to know, and that's why I come to Skeptics in the Pub. One of the big issues, if you look at one of the great, if you like, strengths and values of religion is the sense of community.
Fellowship.
This is my wife goes to church every week. I come to Skeptics in the Pub every month. And that's my community.
You probably don't have to dress up as much here either, really.
Well, being Catholic, they don't dress up.
But they have fantastic hats.
And my wife doesn't wear one.
The Pope does. The Pope's got when he flies on the back of Powdered Toast Man, that's some of the best bits of Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah. I'd love the Pope-mobile.
Oh, he was pretty good.
Batman would love the Pope-mobile.
Look, Adam West, the true Batman. As a believer, Adam West is the one and only true Batman. And the UFO issue, how do you feel about it? Because early on in skepticism, that would have been one of the main ones.
Yeah, I see UFOs as being in there with all the other conspiracy theories. People will... The more you prove that they don't exist, the more they believe that they exist. You reinforce their sense of conspiracy. But I think... I agree with our friend here that the medical issues, particularly the anti-vaxxers, to put it frankly, they have blood on their hands. This is a conspiracy theory that kills babies, and as a grandfather, I find that absolutely abhorrent.
Have you had to step in, if you don't mind me asking, on the personal family level with this argument at all, or not?
Absolutely not, but I've had my wife at a school was approached by one of the teachers, one of the young teachers with her baby, should I have the baby immunised? And I was able to give a few websites, having spoken to my frank hero, or heroine, I mean, you're allowed to say heroine, Dr Rachie, and suggested that they look up immunisation rather than vaccination, and you start looking at some scientifically based, factual websites, and thankfully they had their child vaccinated.
Well, you certainly stood up to the chapter. You had your skeptical chops going on then. Is there a website that you've got, or one that you think's good, that people should visit for science you'd like to recommend to us?
Well, it's not for science, but I have a business. Am I allowed to say my website?
Look, if we've got an issue with what you've been saying, yeah, that's probably where we should go.
chrisjones.com.au.
Oh, look, a last interview now. I've spoken to about almost all the 70 people that were here. Tim, do you think we should still bother with UFOs, bearing in mind that they are real and Eric von Daniken is real as well?
Absolutely. I've travelled in some myself, actually.
Yeah. Because when you got involved with the skeptical movement, I've spoken to some people who've been in the skeptical movement for quite a long time. That would have been one of the initial issues you guys would have dealt with.
Yeah, it was, most definitely. I think we dealt with the key issues that are sort of troubling the world now, UFOs, Bigfoot and Loch Ness monsters.
And should we still bother with that? Should skeptics still bother with that? I say we when you know I love ancient aliens. You know I'm watching the secret UFO histories,
mate. I'm a Loch Ness monster fancier.
Oh, okay.
I've been to Loch Ness about 3 times.
Oh, look, and as people say, if there isn't a monster in there, there should be.
Should be, yes, absolutely. I've been to the museum. The museum's changed over the years. It started off as a really cool little cottage which firmly believed in Loch Ness Monster. It developed into a bigger building, and each time it got more scientific and less interesting. Honestly. Bring back the Loch Ness Monster, I say. The only sign of the Loch Ness Monster I've seen in my visits there was a roadside caravan selling monster burgers, which worried me a lot, actually.
Hey everyone, this is Trent Brusky, creator of DropboxSound.org. Dropbox is a project that's dedicated to supporting skeptical, secular, and science podcasts or YouTubers by creating different music for their shows. You can hear me on such shows as Skepticality, Oddments by Jeff Wagg and his College of Curiosity, and Dogma Debate, along with a few other great shows. If you're in need of any music, please go to www.dropfoxsound.org. Also, facebook.com/dropfox.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now, I must say, in the past week, a couple of days ago, Dr Rachie and myself performed our Mystery Investigator show at Appesley School here in Sydney. Wow, what a great time we had. And it struck me when I was getting ready for the show that that's the 9th year in a row the Mystery Investigators have performed at Appesley. And this year, 2013, marks the 10th anniversary of doing Mystery Investigators. Wow. I guess we must have given our demonstration talk now to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children, both here and we've done it in New Zealand and in the United States, a couple of shows there. Wow, I can't believe it's been 10 years. That's the Mystery Investigators, a show we really love doing. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.